You work in energy, or mining, or manufacturing, a sector that powers a country without ever making headlines. You're used to noise, pipelines humming, refineries running, trucks moving money across provinces without asking permission. But it's 2024. You walk into the control room and something feels off. Not broken, not chaotic, just restrained, like a system holding its breath. You didn't lose demand. The world still needs oil, gas, metals, electricity. You didn't lose workers. They're still here, skilled, waiting. What you lost was margin, because every dollar you generate is now calculated, redistributed, neutralized, not by markets, not by competition, but by a federal formula you didn't vote on and can't opt out of. Canada likes to call it equalization, a quiet, technical word, almost polite. But behind that word sits a machine that moves over $40 billion every year. Money extracted from productive regions and rerouted through Ottawa before being sent elsewhere. No emergency vote, no national crisis. Just a formula running in the background year after year. This system was designed to stabilize the country, to ensure basic services across provinces. Instead, it has created a strange paradox. The more economically successful you are, the less control you have over the wealth you produce. Alberta doesn't shut down because it failed. It slows down because success is penalized, regulated, and redistributed until investment no longer makes sense. This isn't collapse. It's something quieter, more dangerous. A system that drains energy slowly enough that no one notices, until the lights feel too expensive to turn on. On paper, the formula looks harmless, even noble. Ottawa calculates how much revenue each province could raise if it taxed at a national average. Then it fills the gap for provinces that fall below that line. In theory, it's fairness. In reality, it's incentive engineering, because the formula doesn't reward growth. It rewards staying where you are. If a province expands its tax base, develops industry, or unlocks natural resources, its equalization payments shrink. If it doesn't, the money keeps coming. Over time, this creates two Canadas, one that generates wealth but watches it siphoned away, and another that learns it can survive without reform, without expansion, without risk. The numbers are staggering. When you combine equalization with other federal transfers, the flow crosses $40 billion annually. That money doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from production, from exports, from energy, from provinces that fund a system actively restricting their own growth. Alberta's oil revenues help finance a federal government that blocks pipelines. Resource provinces bankroll policies that make their own industries uncompetitive. This isn't cooperation. It's contradiction. And the most dangerous part isn't the money itself. It's the permanence. Equalization has no end date, no performance benchmarks, no exit clause. Once a province becomes dependent, the system adjusts to keep it that way. What was meant to unify Canada has hardened its internal fault lines. Not through conflict, but through accounting. Over time, the formula stopped being economic. It became political. Because equalization doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists inside elections, coalitions, and parliamentary math. Ottawa doesn't just redistribute money, it redistributes stability. Provinces receiving large transfers become predictable, their budgets insulated, their politics calmer, their leverage stronger. Meanwhile, provinces that generate wealth become volatile. Boom and bust economies, angry voters, rising alienation. This is where the system quietly tilts. A federal government doesn't need every province to grow. It needs enough provinces to stay aligned. So policies emerge that make sense on paper, but fracture the map. Environmental restrictions written far from oil fields. Energy strategies designed without energy producers at the table. Quebec becomes the center of gravity in this system, not because of conspiracy, but because of incentives. It receives billions in transfers while maintaining political flexibility, hydropower dominance, cultural protections, strategic neutrality on energy expansion. Alberta, by contrast, is locked in. Its wealth is visible, its industry taxable, its output impossible to hide. So the formula keeps flowing, and resentment keeps building. Not because Canadians hate each other, but because the system quietly pits regions against outcomes they didn't choose. This isn't corruption. It's structural bias, a system that rewards political stability over economic risk, consensus over productivity, silence over reform. And once that logic sets in, changing it becomes almost impossible, because too many provinces are now dependent on it staying exactly the same. The real damage of the $40 billion formula isn't visible in budgets. It shows up in decisions never made, projects delayed, investments redirected, capital leaving quietly. When producers know that success triggers extraction, not reinvestment, behavior changes. Why expand when returns shrink? Why innovate when growth is penalized? Why take political risk when dependency is safer? Equalization was never meant to freeze provinces in place. But over decades, that's exactly what it's done. Some provinces learned to manage decline instead of chasing growth. Others learned that excellence invites interference. The national economy slows, not because Canada lacks resources, talent, or demand, but because its internal incentives contradict its strengths. This is how deindustrialization starts, not with collapse, but with caution. A country rich on paper, restrained in practice, and the longer the formula runs unchanged, the harder it becomes to imagine alternatives, because reform means redistribution of pain, and pain is politically expensive. So Ottawa adjusts around the edges, rebrands programs, changes language, but the core remains untouched. $40 billion a year, flowing automatically, silently reshaping behavior. Canada isn't being torn apart by anger alone. It's being worn down by a system that mistakes balance for progress and stability for strength. Alienation doesn't arrive with flags or slogans. It starts with accounting tables. At first, it's frustration. Why are we paying more and deciding less? Then it becomes distance. Federal politics feel abstract, detached, irrelevant to the realities on the ground. Western provinces begin to see Ottawa not as a partner, but as a filter, taking value, returning rules. This is where separatist language quietly enters the conversation. Not because most people want to leave Canada, but because they feel Canada already left them. Equalization didn't invent this feeling, it institutionalized it. When wealth-producing regions are treated as permanent funding sources, identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as a stakeholder. You start seeing yourself as infrastructure. The irony is brutal. The same provinces accused of being selfish are financing national cohesion. The same regions portrayed as reckless are underwriting stability elsewhere. Over time, belief erodes, not belief in government, belief in the deal itself. Confederation was supposed to be a trade, shared prosperity in exchange for shared authority. But the $40 billion formula broke that symmetry. Authority centralized, prosperity redistributed, responsibility blurred, so resentment doesn't explode. It calcifies. And once regions stop believing the system can work for them, they stop trying to fix it. They disengage. That's when a country doesn't break loudly. It starts coming apart quietly, province by province. Everyone agrees the system is flawed. Almost no one agrees on how to change it. Because reforming equalization isn't about economics. It's about survival. For recipient provinces, reform means budget shocks, political backlash, and uncertainty. For contributing provinces, reform means confronting a system they've already lost faith in. And for Ottawa, reform means something worse, choosing winners and losers openly. So, the safest option becomes inertia. Commissions are formed, reports are written, language is softened. Modernization? Adjustments. Fairness. But the core formula survives untouched, because too many political careers depend on it doing so. There is no national referendum on equalization, no expiration date, no mechanism to ask whether the system still matches the country it governs. It simply continues, $40 billion every year, based on assumptions written for a different Canada. A Canada with fewer global competitors, less capital mobility, lower energy stakes. In today's world, money moves faster than loyalty, and systems that punish productivity don't just lose growth, they lose legitimacy. That's the trap. Reform is too risky. Stagnation feels manageable. Until it isn't. Canada doesn't fail all at once. It strains. Capital leaves first. Not dramatically. Quietly. Redirected to jurisdictions where growth isn't treated as a liability. Investment decisions become defensive. Projects are scaled down. Expansion plans rewritten with caution baked in. Over time, the country's strongest sectors learn to operate below their potential. Not because they can't grow, but because the system makes growth expensive. This is the long-term risk no budget document captures. A nation that trains itself to stay comfortable rather than competitive, balanced rather than ambitious, predictable rather than productive. The $40 billion formula didn't create this mindset, but it locked it in. As global competition intensifies, Canada doesn't lose because it lacks resources. It loses because its internal incentives contradict its external realities. Energy-rich provinces hesitate to lead. Industrial regions avoid scale. Innovation slows, not from fear of failure, but fear of extraction. And when growth slows everywhere, redistribution stops being solidarity. It becomes scarcity management. That's when the arguments turn sharper. Not about fairness, but about survival. A country can survive disagreement. It can even survive inequality. What it cannot survive is a system where success and sacrifice are permanently misaligned. That's how friction becomes structural, and structure becomes destiny. There's no dramatic breaking point for Canada, no single vote, no sudden collapse, just a formula that keeps running, $40 billion a year. Automatically, indifferently. A system designed for unity, now governing a country it no longer fully understands. People don't revolt against equalization. They adjust around it. Businesses invest elsewhere. Workers follow opportunity. Regions retreat into identity. The center grows more powerful. The edges grow more distant. And slowly, the idea of Canada shifts from a shared project to a negotiated arrangement. This is the cost of mistaking redistribution for cohesion, of believing money can replace consent, of assuming stability means strength. The formula will keep balancing numbers, but it cannot balance belief. And when belief erodes, no amount of federal transfer can buy it back. Canada isn't breaking because it lacks money. It's breaking because the system moving that money forgot what it was meant to protect. Not equality, but trust.